Whether you're joining a Product Marketing Alliance event for the first time, or if you're a seasoned regular, welcome to Masters of Product Marketing 2022. We have an awesome lineup of leadership-focused content for you to enjoy over the next 2 days. But before we dive in, I just want to say a few thank yous. Thank you to our sponsor partners, insightful speakers, and of course you, our lovely audience. From wherever in the world you are watching, we hope you enjoy the sessions. To get the most out of these talks, please ensure you are sharing your feedback and asking your questions in the comments section, as our speakers will be answering them throughout the day. After the event, a great place to continue the conversation is in the PMA Slack community. If you aren't already a member, hop on over and join the discussions. And if that's still not enough, then why not become a PMA member and benefit from unlimited access to exclusive templates, frameworks, meetups, mentors, and our entire library of videos and slide decks from all our events. So with all that to come, let's dive right into the next session.
Ooh. Good to know this is being recorded. Right, moving swiftly on. So guys, just a quick introduction from me. I'm a recovering consultant. I spent a bit of time in my early career in London working for boutique agencies, so boutique you would have never heard of them. Then I went off, did a master's, and switched off to the wonderful world of mobility, where I've been based in LATAM for the last 2 years. The first gig I had with Uber was running their product portfolio for Latin America. So think of anything you see in the UberX app for ride hailing that is an UberX. So Black, Comfort, here we have motorbikes, taxis, all sorts of weird, wonderful things. That was all with me for a big chunk of time. And these days I am the head of rider core operations for Latin America. So that's everything in the rider app related to experience, growth, and engagement. It's very exciting. And a very large portion of my day is spent trying to understand our users' problems and communicate it to our product team so we can get things prioritized and built and into the world, into the app that you guys use on a day-to-day basis. Now, if anyone was paying attention to the opening slide, you would have noticed that this is entitled the presentation formerly known as Product Parenthood 101. That's because I rewrote it this morning. I give this a very similar kind of speech internally in Uber a couple of times, and recently I've been trying out a new kind of version in my one-on-ones and coaching, and it seems to be going well. So you guys are the very first victims of a brand new, I've switched from one tenuous metaphor around parenthood to a second tenuous metaphor around bees, so bear with me. Why am I talking to you guys about bees? Bees are super interesting. If a colony of bees gets too big for its little hive, or for whatever reason the hive gets destroyed, the whole colony will fly up in a big swarm, find something resembling a tree branch, and it'll form like a little kind of living hive while they're kind of looking for a new home. And all the little bees will go off in different directions, looking for new places to build a hive. Underneath your roof, a hole in a tree, a little kind of hole in the ground, wherever, lots of different options if you're a bee looking for real estate. The bee will go in, and when it finds a nice little spot that it thinks is a good candidate for a hive, they'll go in, they'll assess it, they'll look at the lighting, they'll have a look and see if there's enough room. There's a bunch of different things they'll gauge. And then they'll fly back, and they do the most extraordinary thing. It's called a quiver dance. They do a little jig, and depending on how enthusiastically they do that dance, and they're communicating the direction of the place they found, and the enthusiasm they do it gives an indication to other bees as to how cool of a place this is to go to build a new hive. And then they bring more bees, and if the bees come back and they like it, then they do the little dance well, and then you have all these little dancing bees. And when enough little bees are doing the jig, all the bees suddenly, they hit quorum, so enough of the bees are doing it, all the bees suddenly go and they start building the hive off in this new location. When I heard that on a little documentary the other day, I suddenly realized how close my life and day-to-day existence at Uber resembled that little process of finding new hives. My job on a day-to-day basis consists of doing 3 things. It's searching for new opportunities, assessing the new opportunities, and then dancing and storytelling and shouting about those opportunities to as many people as I can to bring them along with me, to get the buy-in, to shift the big machine that is Uber to kind of focus on building and solving interesting problems. So I'm going to go through these one-on-one, if you'll again forgive perhaps a very stretched metaphor over the next few minutes. So, searching like a bee. In order to go off and find really, really good opportunities, there are three things we have to think about doing really well. The first one is starting with first principles thinking, which means beginning with a very, very, very clear problem that we're solving. The little bee is going off to find a hive, and it's trying to assess, how good that hive is as a kind of new home for the colony. For us, we optimize in terms of things like growth, cost savings, consumer adoption, experience. There's all sorts of different kind of metrics you can assign for. But once you have the clear goal up front, the goal is to start with a blank sheet of paper and try and break that problem into the simplest components that you can to understand, what problems you can solve in service of that goal. The goal normally represents some sort of an impact on the user that we want to have in the world. In order to do that breakdown, the skill set that's super essential is understanding segmentation. Segmentation, you probably would have heard the cliche, the 5 W's. So the where, what, why, how, who. Pretty sure I got all of those. There is no right or wrong way to do a segmentation. It totally depends on the industry you work in and the context in which you're operating. But it's a very, very good practice to go through those 5 things and say, okay, well, if I break down, like, I want to grow my user base in a certain market, or I want to increase the experience or whatever, you can go through those 5 questions and ask, for example, okay, who? Is it new users, old users? Is it men and women? Is it young people, old people? Is it commuters versus party goers versus people, ordering things on other people's behalf? Is it, you can think of all these kind of different ways you can break down the who kind of question behind it, and different, there are all sorts of different things that are appropriate depending on what industry you're working in. Where you can think in terms of little cities, big cities, city center, suburb, office building versus non-office building, depending on, if you had an ice cream shop, you could be looking at your park and recreational kind of sites versus the ones you have in corporate settings or the ones you have in theme parks. You can break down the problem in so many different ways. And like I said, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It just depends on the problem you're solving for and what you're trying to accomplish. And as you're doing that, the objective that you're trying to find are problems, not ideas, especially in the context of, the kind of stuff that we do in Uber on a day-to-day basis. We have to work with the engineers to try and guide them to the problems that we think that we need to solve for our users to add the most value. We are absolutely 99.999% of the time not the best placed people to be deciding what needs to be built, how it's going to be built, all that kind of stuff. We don't have the expertise, and we certainly don't have the skill sets to do that. But what we are very good at doing is understanding the users, sizing up an issue, and bring it to the product teams to guide them in service of coming to a really good solution. So that's the ultimate objective, is getting to a really, really well-defined problem. And then you end up with a bunch of different problems. And how do you identify which ones are the ones you want to focus on? The challenge is to assess like a bee. So there are 3 kind of things to think about here that we do on a day-to-day basis. The first one, you have the kind of clear goal underneath, but against each of these things, trying to think of a really good one. So like conversion rates, for example. Let's say I was starting an app and I was launching into a market and I want to look at different groups, and my ultimate KPI is signups to first purchase. So that's my ultimate KPI. I'm looking at the KPI and I'm breaking that down according to men and women or children and adults or urban users versus non-urban users, whatever the kind of segmentation you've chosen. So the first one is like, do we have a really, really clear KPI? The second one is, do we have a really good benchmark? A KPI on its own is meaningless. 12%. Is that amazing? Is that terrible? Is that 3 times as good as the next kind of market competitor in the industry? Is it nowhere near as good as our neighboring markets? Is it 4 times better than the neighboring market? There's all sorts of ways you can establish a benchmark, but unless you have a benchmark for context, it's impossible to know how well you're doing and understand where the opportunities are. Because ultimately what you want to do is go, right, let's say I'm the app I'm launching and I'm trying to get kids and my conversion rate to first purchase with kids is 4%, and it should be 20%. What's that worth? If I don't know what it's worth, and I can't put a number against that other people can understand, and I can quantify it in terms of, you're looking at revenue, profit, whatever, first users, there's all sorts of common metrics you use in an organization. But if I can't quantify it in a way that I can really measure and compare different opportunities, it's impossible to know where I should be deploying resources and what I should be advocating for. I was actually, funnily enough, a guy who's just joined Uber who used to work at Amazon and Airbnb, and I got chatting to him. And he told me a story about a time he met a guy called Jeff. You might know him. He owns a pretty successful bookstore in Seattle, Washington. And my friend asked him, he said, Jeff, how do you decide what to work on? And Jeff sits there, staring wisely off into the distance, and he smiles and he goes, 3 questions. Is it a big problem? Is it, something, worth our time, something we should get really excited about? Is it a big, big, big problem? Should we be the ones fixing it? Does it match our expertise? Does it match our scope? Does it match our skill set? Are we the ones who are best placed to go off and try and solve this thing? You can think about that in terms of the context of a company or a team within a company or an individual within the team. There's different ways you can break that down on levels. And do we have a clear path to success? The other word people use for this is like feasibility or viability. Can we tick off those 3 things? If we can say yes to all 3 of those, it is absolutely something we should be prioritizing. Then we have to dance like a bee. So with all these things, if you imagine the life of the product engineer sitting in San Francisco or one of our other kind of tech centers around the world, but a big one in Seattle as well. If you think about the life of our product engineers, we're a global organization. I represent one big mega region with my stakeholders, but I've got counterparts in Europe, Australia, Africa, all sorts of places. And they are getting a shopping list of ideas left, right, and center coming out of their ears on a day-to-day basis. How did they know that the problem that you have or that your users have, rather, because we're here to solve problems for users, how do they know that the problem that your users have is the problem they should be investing the time, the energy, and the resources to solve? So I would say 95% of my job is, once we get to a really clearly well-defined problem, once we have a really good kind of sizing against it, and we know it's something that we can address and we should address, then it's about influencing, convincing, and bringing people on board with me. Remember the little bee who came and did the little dance, got all the other bees to do a little dance, and then come and check out the problem, then come back, and then go out again, then come back, and then you watch, and then eventually when enough people are on board with it, then the whole thing shifts. And Uber is a big, crazy organization. It does take quite a bit to kind of move things if it's a big lift you're asking for. And there it kind of boils down to 3 things. Story and sound bites, watch, listen, and repeat, and bring people with you. What do I mean with story and sound bites? If you can't articulate a problem or an opportunity really, really clearly in a way that is sticky and resonates with people, you can have the best idea in the world. Greatness is achieved through the agency of others. We always have to rely on other people at some point to come along with us to help us build the kind of really big, exciting things. When we're telling stories and we're thinking of sound bites, we speak to 3 things. It's either going to be the brain, the heart, or the stomach. So the brain is a logical kind of part. Like, does this make sense? If someone puts this in front of me and I say, hey, look, I'm going to give you an assessment and say, here's a problem, here's the benchmark, here's the gap, this is what it's worth. Can they follow that logic super, super clearly? Does the brain understand what it means? The problem is that doesn't work on its own. You have to play up to the stomach as well. The stomach is the survival kind of, I need to eat kind of thing. If you can't articulate it in terms that links to them and their objectives and their goals and their survival and their kind of well-being within the organization, then it doesn't matter. I think a lot of people, we have guys in the engagement team who for a long time kind of struggled with this because they came from marketing backgrounds, they came from insights backgrounds, they came from kind of, more kind of like social media marketing kind of backgrounds, and now they're in a kind of more kind of operationally orientated team. And they talk about things in terms of impressions and click rates and conversions, and the operators there going, great, so what? So 14,000 people clicked on the link. What does that mean for me? And then you convert it into revenue or profit margin or first users or that stuff that they can understand. And then they go, aha, I understand now. I can join the dots between that really cool idea and what I'm ultimately going to be measured and judged upon, or the kind of thing that I am optimizing for my users and for my base and for all that kind of stuff. So can you appeal to that stomach? And the last one is the heart. And the heart, I think, is what makes it sticky. That kind of, can you bring emotion into it? Can you make it funny? Can you make it, mission driven? Can you really kind of pull at the heartstrings to get people to kind of latch onto an idea and have it stick in the brain so they can repeat it and kind of do the dance with you, the little quiver dance that the bees do with you to bring other people along. That is an iterative process. Those sound bites and those really convincing kind of arguments and bits and pieces of the storyline, the puzzle together aren't easy to construct. The skill set that's super important to getting there is watching, listening, repeating. The number of times, for example, I've given the versions of this talk in one-on-one sessions and coaching sessions and shadowing sessions and all that kind of stuff. And every time I tweak and I tweak and I tweak, because I watch and in this case, it's a shame because I can't see anyone's faces. So I hope everyone's happy and engaged. But I would watch, I'd listen, I see what resonates, I see what causes questions where people aren't super sure about what I've said. And I make a note and go, that could have been clearer. That point didn't land. That point did land. I'm definitely going to keep that one. And you watch and listen and repeat until you get to a few really, really effective, big, exciting numbers articulated in a way that resonates with people's goals and really, really motivates them, inspires them to action. And then the last point, which I think is super important, is, and it kind of links back to the search like a bee where we're searching for problems. If you come and you try and ram a solution down people's throats and you're there going, do this thing for me, I've got this amazing idea and everyone should be doing it with me right now, the chances of other people feeling like they have ownership over it, like they want to kind of help and kind of push these things with you, kind of diminishes over time, unless it's an absolutely cracking idea. But a lot of time people want to feel like they're adding something to the idea as well, to really kind of feel like they have a sense of purpose attached to it. And that's the trick. If you can bring people along with you, make your cause feel like their cause, make your problem feel like their problem, and have the sensation and the notion that you guys are solving things together, that is when the kind of the magic happens and you suddenly go, okay, I'm not here trying to convince you to do something. You're now working with me, trying to convince other people to believe in this problem together and collectively trying to bring the best solution possible to the mix. And that, I believe, concludes my tenuous metaphor of bees and product marketing. So I'm going to pause there for questions, because I know there's a Q&A section at the end. But please fire away.
Thank you so much, Hal. That was a really interesting delivery. Really, I've never heard it that way before. So very appreciate you sharing that. I want to kick off with a question that kind of came up from something that somebody actually said on a panel yesterday, and I think it's really, has a lot of resonance with this example. So they're saying that often as a product marketer, if you are, sharing so much customer feedback and adding to the product roadmap and trying to influence like that, you can feel like you're really slowing down the process. You obviously mentioned, Uber likes to move quickly, but there's a lot of momentum needed to make that move. I guess, do you have any advice kind of for people that might feel like sharing this level of feedback and influencing the roadmap is just slowing things down?
I think it all depends on volume. Where this kind of stuff falls to pieces, and I think that's why the middle bit, the assessment piece, is really, really, really important. If you can sit there and go, right, in Uber, there are 1.5 million things we could probably improve with our app. It's not perfect. There are 1,000 things, different insights that we could bring to the table to try and influence the process. The more volume of ideas and kind of problems you bring to the table, the more you dilute, and you're right, the more you slow down the process, because every time you bring an idea, someone has to sit there, listen, consider, and then potentially make a move. And there is only so much brain power, energy, political kind of capital that you have to kind of play against those things. So having the ability to assess ideas really effectively lets you pick the one or two, I like to call it whale hunting. Like, I'm not here trying to advocate on 100 little things. Give me 2 or 3 really, really big things. And then, like I said, especially this last bit, which really resonated with me, you just sit there and it's repetition mode. I will have talked about certain problems. I have like 1 or 2 things, which I can't sadly share too much detail on at the moment. But I have 1 or 2 things at the moment which are really top of mind. And my job is sitting in 20 forums a week, repeating the same 3 sound bites again and again and again until other people are bringing, now over the course of 3 weeks, you see the kind of momentum shift and you see people moving. And now people are actively engaging and bringing ideas to how to solve it to the table. And that's where the kind of magic happens. But yeah, I think there's a balance of volume and also knowing that this is super valuable. There's a reason this relationship exists. And like, we don't call it necessarily product marketing in Uber, but that's essentially what we do. We have local teams. We're really big. It is impossible for the guys in product to have a full understanding of our users at a granular enough level across all our markets to act effectively. And it's a service. Our service is giving them that understanding so they can act effectively. It's about striking that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a follow-up question to that, and it's just completely gone out my head. But Chloe has a question as well, and she is asking, what frameworks do you use when you're crafting the storytelling for your messaging and positioning, if any? And yeah, what's been the most effective?
It's a really good question. Some companies like Amazon are very, very ruthless in the sense that they have, they have the PR FAQ and they have the Word documents and they have like very set things. I think Uber's a little bit more promiscuous. I think it depends a lot on the forum. It depends a lot on the setting, the audience, all that kind of stuff. For me, the key thing is that kind of, right, here's the problem, here's the logical breakdown, here's why this is the thing that I need to fix on, like, breaking down a problem into logical terms and drawing that connection to here's the KPI, here's the gap, here's the big kind of exciting piece of the puzzle and why we should care about it. Once you have that and you have the sound bites, you can rearrange them into whatever kind of frameworks or storytelling settings, or I can do Word documents, decks, I can do it in a one-on-one, I can do it in a large forum in a Q&A. Then you can rearrange and bring it really, really simply into the process. But most of what I do starts on a blank piece of paper with a few bullet points. And one thing you guys will notice here, the thing that I think works really effectively, everything here is in 3s. Not sure anyone spotted that, but like all the different pieces, like breaking down the thing to, okay, I'm gonna take one big idea and then I'm gonna get like the next 3 pieces underneath. Then I get the next 3 pieces underneath that and the next 3 pieces. Then ask you, rule of 3, it was always drilled into me and it works really effectively. And I think if you can force yourself to think in those terms, and I said, go back to first principles and break things down, then I think you can articulate things in a really impactful and effective way in whatever setting you need to. You can adapt to different styles that you might experience in different companies as you evolve through your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great advice. The follow-up question I did have for you just before was going to be around, obviously this bee analogy works really, really well if everyone in the company feels like a valued contributor and can bring those ideas to the table or start those ideas and conversations or pieces of momentum around that. I guess for the more junior people in the organization or your team directly, like, do you have any advice for bringing that out of them and kind of creating that culture where everyone is a equal contributor?
It's a super interesting question. I think with these kind of things, one, data is power. Like, trying to do step 3 before you're really effective at doing step 1 and 2, the search and assess kind of piece, isn't going to get you very far. And I think a lot of people, when you see more junior kind of members kind of voicing ideas and all that kind of stuff, the one bit they're missing is you're like, not quite sure. Yeah, you're bringing an idea to the table. Great. Like, we like ideas, but you're not bringing the problem, the size of the problem. Why should I focus on it? Why should I deprioritize this thing and focus on your thing? So that kind of like, hey, look, starting with the common goal of the team or the organization, like, I want to start there. I'm going to break it down. Here's the opportunity I found. Here's where we are now. Here's where we should be. Here's why I think we should be here. Here's the gap, here's the reason why, and this is what I think we could do to do something about it. And then kind of bring it up. And then your job of doing the dance starts a little bit earlier in the process, and you have to get more and more people. You have to go to your manager, then get them involved, and then they have to go off and get someone else involved, and it takes a little bit longer. The more and more senior you get, the only variable that really changes is like a slightly faster process of doing the dance and a fewer number of stakeholders to do the dance for. But we've got people in the organization, really impressive entrepreneurs, who spent a year and a half fighting for an idea, being told no 20 times, really kind of, having to be really scrappy and creative about how they got resources and how they built results and how they kind of did analysis on their own time to get things and eventually kind of turn the organization around. And now they have that kind of win behind them and they have that bit of credibility. The next thing they bring to the table, we're going to pay a lot more attention to. And I think that is one of the things that you have to kind of build up with time, with reputation and a bit of a track record.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, that brings us to about time. So we will leave it there for today. But just want to say a massive thank you again, Hal, for sharing your story with us and for joining us at Masters of Product Marketing. We do have one more session lined up in this morning's segment, and then we'll be taking a short break. So stay right with us.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for having me.